Welcome to the Persevere Podcast, powered by Checkable Medical and hosted by Patty Post, a female founder, entrepreneur, wife, and mother of 3, doing all of the things. The strength to persevere in business is powered by passion, grit, and hard work. The Persevere Podcast is for entrepreneurs and business leaders who set out to innovate and change the world with their ideas. Whether it's fundraising your startup, product development, marketing, branding, or scaling your existing business, this podcast is for you. We'll discuss everything it takes to persevere and build the business you've always dreamed of. Let's make it happen.
This is the Persevere Podcast for founders in their first 5 years of business who aspire to hit 8 figures. Hi, I'm Patty Post, founder and CEO of Checkable Medical, and I am your host. Today, we are having a new way of doing the podcast, and it's a new series, and it's called The Pitch. So this is episode 1 of The Pitch. And our founder today that we are going to have pitched to us is Jess Azure, who is founder of a company called Spadesso. And she aspires to raise an angel round. So this podcast is going to be in the format of, we have 2 venture capitalists, myself, as well as Jess Azure. Jess is going to pitch her business, and then we're going to have the 2 venture capitalists ask questions to Jess. And then we're going to have Jess ask a few questions to them. So let's get into who our venture capitalists are. So let's start with Hannah Lange. So Hannah Lange, she is an investment manager of the North Dakota Development Fund. And she works with entrepreneurs to construct equity and debt financing packages to fund the growth of their businesses. And she spends most of her days analyzing businesses and from the pre-revenue stage to well-established companies. And really, she evaluates how they are going to affect the North Dakota economy. Our next guest, venture capitalist, is Tim Weelborg, who is a managing partner of a new venture fund out of South Dakota called Homegrown Capital. Tim Weelborg is the general partner for Homegrown Capital. He has facilitated over 100 angel deals in the state of South Dakota, and he has started 14 angel funds in the state of South Dakota. He previously was the executive director for the Enterprise Institute, and the Homegrown Capital is primarily focused on investing in Midwest businesses that are in the early stage, but very small amount of pre-revenue. Ideally, they are in revenue. So our 2 venture capitalists will be asking Jess questions, and we will be getting right into it with Jess. She'll give her 2-minute pitch, and we will be underway. The goal of this episode is really for any founders out there that aspire to raise an angel round or even aspire to raise beyond that, that you're going to hear firsthand what it sounds like from the investor shoes. What are they listening to? And how does it sound when you're asking questions, when you're pitching your business? And you might even identify some things that she did really great or some areas of opportunities that she could have worked on. So with that, if you are a founder and you want to be featured on the Persevere Podcast, please email me at patty@checkablemedical.com. And I'd love to feature you and hear you pitch. And then if you know a venture capitalist that would like to be one of the 2 that are featured in the pitch, please email me too. I'd love to meet you and have you on the show. So with that, let's get over to hearing the pitch. This is Patty Post, and I am your host of the Persevere Podcast. Today we have a new format, and I'm calling it The Pitch. And it's for all of you entrepreneurs out there who are looking to raise money. Maybe you're in the really early stage, the ideation stage of your business, and you are curious of, when do I set out to raise my angel round? How do I do that? When's a good time? Well, today you are going to get live feedback. We're going to hear from our entrepreneur, Jess Azure. And Jess is a founder. She's founder of Spadesso, and it's a technology platform for spas. And we have our two venture capitalists. We have Hannah Lange, who is the manager of the Development Fund. Hannah works with entrepreneurs across North Dakota and the Midwest to work with them on their businesses. They are debt financing line of business within the state of North Dakota. And Tim Weelborg is general partner of Homegrown Capital. Tim has started 14 plus angel funds in the state of South Dakota, and he has made hundreds of angel investments. So we have lots of experience here. Hannah is actually a 2-time guest on the Persevere podcast, so you might be familiar with her. And I must say, she is one of our most highly listened to guests of the Persevere podcast too. So thank you, all of you, for being here today. The format is we're going to have Jess give us a 2-minute pitch. And then what's going to happen is it's going to go down like it normally would if she was pitching to raise her funds. And then we're going to do a little bit of Q&A where then Jess has the mic and she can ask them some questions. So it's going to be an interactive podcast today. Then we'll let Jess go and we'll just talk a little bit about how to best prepare ourselves as entrepreneurs for this type of pitch and just pitching in general. So it's going to be fast, but it's going to be meaty. And with that said, let's get to it. So Jess, you're on.
Sounds great. Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. Thanks again for having me here today and for joining us, Tim and Hannah. I'm really here today to talk to you a little bit about my company, Spadesso. So I'm a former massage therapist of 8 years and a licensed master esthetician. I've served in the spa industry as both a practitioner and an educator. I can tell you a lot about the industry, but today I'm here to talk specifically more about scheduling and booking. And with my experience, I can tell you that the lifeblood of any salon and spa is its scheduling and booking. So in the US, we have about 1.2 million salon and spas. And we know about half of those are using some type of scheduling solution right now. The salon and spa industry, software salon and spa industry as a whole is about 186 million, and it's expected to double in about 4 years. So there's a ton of growth happening in this field right now. And before we kind of talk about how Spadesso plays into that, I think it's important to have just a tiny bit more background. The industry as a whole has really been shaken up in the last 10 years, moving away from that traditional employer-employee model and moving to more of that solo practitioner, that booth rents. And that took shape kind of about the same time as that golden age of social media, right? So it had never been easier to connect with, for providers to connect with their audience. But fast forward to today, and we know that space has changed a ton. It's no longer that simple to connect in these spaces. And so we're kind of left asking, like, where are clients going when they're looking for someone new, or they're just simply looking for an appointment that is available now? So these clients, they love scheduling appointments themselves. They're busier than ever. And so it's just easier to be able to do it on their own time. And we know about half of the people who are scheduling their own appointments are looking for same day or next day appointments. And so we've taken that research and we took it a step further and we said, how many places are you willing to check? And a good majority of people would tell us that they would check 2 to 3 different sites. And if they couldn't find anything, they just gave up their search. And so for me, I saw this as a huge opportunity loss in our industry. And I moved forward with creating an MVP that takes those last minute openings from providers and puts them on our platform. We're making search and booking faster and easier by allowing consumers to do it all in one place. But to me, the best part is that we're helping providers with marketing and lead generation. And we're doing it by exposing them to consumers that are actively seeking out these services. So a good majority of the salon and spa providers that we have are either new to the industry, so think like 1 to 3 years, or have recently gone out on their own as a solo practitioner, or they've moved from one market to another and they need to reestablish a clientele. With them, we're currently utilizing a transactional revenue model, and we only charge them when we fill an appointment. We see a lot of opportunity to grow beyond this and introduce like subscriptions for both consumers and for providers, kind of with that emphasis on maybe like tiered marketing and advertisement opportunity. And to be honest with you, we have a lot to do to get there. So really for us to make that happen, we're kind of looking for an investment of about $350,000 to help us build kind of a more sophisticated, scalable web app. And I'm sure you have a lot of questions for me. So I guess we can kind of dive into those, but I hope that maybe you have a little interest or you have interest in telling me your thoughts on finding and filling appointments faster and easier.
Awesome. Thanks, Jess. That was great. For all you listeners, this is Hannah speaking. So I recently moved to a new city, and so I was trying to find someone to do my hair going forward, and it's kind of a pain to find someone who specializes in your area. But with that said, most people have their person and they are committed to that person. So how many people, I don't know if you have facts on or any metrics on like the amount of people who are actually searching for new individuals, a new provider.
Yeah, so I'm really glad you brought that up because I do think that there are some elements within the industry that remain provider specific, right? And so we know that I'll use myself as an example. I absolutely love going to the same person to get my hair colored and cut. That's just very important to me, develop a relationship, all that kind of stuff. However, I know that there's this budding industry, and I think it's sort of like wellness is leisure. And so what we can kind of say is that when you look at things like massages and pedicures, you may have a favorite person, but massage therapists actually probably can only work about 20 hours a week, 25, especially if they're like doing some serious hardcore work. And so sometimes those practitioners get booked out, maybe like 2 to 3 weeks in advance. And so if I have an acute need, it's very hard for me to actually get in with them, when I actually have the need. And so there are those exceptions that you're willing to make where you're willing to say, I loved Hannah, but in this instance, I'm willing to try someone new. And then I think there's those people that are willing to pursue it as more of like, think of it like art, right? Like you can have a favorite artist, but that doesn't mean you can't appreciate another artist or another bottle of wine. Maybe you have your favorite wine. And so I think like things like massage is very much the case that you can love something, but also be willing to seek out someone else. But I will tell you, and I'm sorry, I don't have a total addressable market figure for you at this time, but I will also tell you that there's a lot of people out there that are terrible at scheduling and are just simply willing to try someone new in the sense that this is when I have available and I need it now. And couple that with a coming generation that is probably more used to on-demand services. I see this as an opportunity for us to kind of capture a place within the market.
Nice job, Jess. This is Tim. Say just a few maybe boring questions to kind of help me kind of get the context, maybe to ask some follow-up questions. One, where are you at kind of from a business standpoint today? Are you a formal entity? What's your current headcount? Are you actually selling your platform as a service or are you collecting transaction fees at this point?
Yeah.
Maybe just a little background there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to share some of that. So right now, I'm a solo founder and my team consists of a couple different contractors that I work with on a regular basis to help us develop products and tools. One of my developers is in Spain. His name's Jose, and actually his wife also helps me with design things too. And then the other piece that we're trying to develop right now is our data collection and data automation, I should say. And I'm working with a Python developer for that. His name is Derek. He's been really great. Kind of started with one tool and built from there. And that's the majority of it. On the platform right now, we have about 12 providers. We started in April. I think we started with, it was 3. And in that first month, I think we moved to 4. And now we've kind of moved into that frame of 12. At one point, we had like 16, but we were also utilizing kind of just some free offerings when we first got started. All the providers that we work with at this point, with the exception of maybe one who's still on a free account, they pay us per transaction. And so, we invoice to them and we have customers that come and book. We've come across a few real issues. And I apologize if I missed one of your questions. Did I forget anything in there?
What type of company are you? We're an
LLC for sure. Yep. Have been since 2020.
Very good. Well, congrats on hitting that revenue kind of milestone. That's a huge hurdle and a huge filter kind of for finance folks like us. So congrats on getting there. So I can't help but dig in right away to kind of your business model from a transaction standpoint, which makes sense. What's holding you up? Or, I hear you talk about kind of moving to a subscription type model. That seems to be kind of the current and perpetual buzz these days. What's holding you up from going down that path?
So I do have some concerns for our providers, especially since our model is built around these practitioners who are solopreneurs. And I think that for them, they're already shelling out some money on a subscription for their appointments, their scheduling software service that they are using. And so I think for me, it's about finding what does that figure look like that makes sense to them and makes sense for us as a business. But also, I think the other thing is that I guess that's probably the biggest thing. And then I think that right now, our platform is we can get you signed up. We don't really necessarily have that user component just yet. And so that would be something that, again, we just have to take the time to build out. So maybe that's more, I kind of was thinking when I first started, I think my goal was really just kind of testing that proof of concept and saying, is this something that we could get providers interested in? When I think of, if I can reference sort of something as an example, when I think of lead generation within the real estate industry, when Zillow came along, that industry is very upset about what Zillow was doing to it, right? And so I don't know that I necessarily wanted to come in and I was very worried that, maybe providers would say, what are you doing? We don't want you to help with this. And so I really wanted to kind of test that. And now I think we have tested it. And our providers, in fact, I had a provider reach out and just say, hey, it's been a little while since I've seen some leads, what's going on? And I just had to say, hey, you've been really busy, on the appointment finder. I'm only seeing maybe 4 or 5 appointments a week. So I just figured you were busier. So what I'm kind of saying is that that's not necessarily the case anymore. I think that the providers do want us to help with that. And they're excited about the ways we can partner.
Do you see a future kind of where you could replace the other, the owner's other kinds of scheduling software that they're paying for to kind of free up some budget that they could exclusively use you? Or do you intend to always be supplementary, or kind of just handling a component of their bandwidth?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked, because that is something that's definitely been on my mind. And I'm kind of remaining open. I will tell you, when I set out to do this, I don't know that my goal was necessarily to become a quote unquote scheduler. I think there are several out there that are available to the industry. I think that some of them are in a way maybe even overbuilt, that there's a lot of people that are signed up for a product that they're not even using to its full capacity. But then there are also players that are in the marketplace that are huge and offer a scheduler for free. Square is one example. Square doesn't have a marketplace. And so, we are able to kind of meet that need right there. Some of them do have a marketplace. And I think that's important to also add. And we're talking about the competitive landscape. But the marketplace is very cumbersome. And why wouldn't it be? I mean, they have a duty, if everyone's on a subscription model and suddenly now so-and-so's appointments are kind of appearing more often or in front of another provider's, I think that could kind of create a dynamic where it's but we're paying for the same amount. And it seems like you're promoting Susan's over, Zen massage. And so I guess what I'm trying to tell you is that I'm very willing to remain open and see kind of where the research and the data will take us, but I haven't discovered exactly what that right path is just yet.
Yeah, very fair.
How long do you think your development is going to take to kind of get the finished product out the door?
Yeah. So luckily I have this really great mentor. And so when those kind of questions come up, I am able to kind of talk to him a little bit. He thinks that we've done a lot. When I initially started the project, I did create some wireframes to just kind of frame out what my ideas and what my overall goal was with the project. That with kind of some of the design elements that we have, he thinks that we could probably create within probably a 30-week time frame, I believe.
I'm always curious kind of your thoughts, Jess, or founder's thoughts. It sounds like, you're certainly early stage, you're at revenue, which is awesome. I'm guessing you're kind of finding these earlier adopters, low risk to try your service, right? Because they don't pay anything unless you coordinate a booking. I like that. And I can understand kind of how you're starting out. But, I always want to kind of know and understand, what what do you see as the kind of the key catalyst that will help push kind of from this early customer phase to perhaps kind of this growth or rapid growth phase? In the angel and venture capital kind of context, we need traction and growth, right? So really maybe it's more of a marketing strategy type question. How are you going to show up? Are you rolling out geographically? Are you kind of starting around home? Are you moving out in, city by city, state by state? How are you going to show up as a viable option for all of these solo practitioners if that's kind of your key target market?
That's a very good question. And I think that, as we approach, we have two things that we need to do there. So right now our product is only offering 1-hour massages and haircuts. And we just simply tried to pick maybe what would be the most popular services. And oddly enough, massages are far more popular than our haircuts are right now. And I don't know if that's too just a marketing thing, but again, kind of talking about that very provider specific, maybe that has something to do with it as well. Yes. So we have area of opportunity to grow there. And my first approach, with the current MVP was to kind of expand and move into other service offerings. And that was going to be kind of maybe the first phase. And then I saw another area of opportunity for us that I think we could take on with potential would be kind of moving in, kind of growing our provider base, right? So that's another opportunity. Right now, as I mentioned, a good majority of our providers are kind of like in that category of new. But my goal was always to also kind of capture some of those really great providers that you can't normally find, right? That they're just always booked. And how do they continue to grow and develop, right? Because you should be always having a nice inflow of new customers. Like when I see providers that, want to focus on having just, like when they say like, oh, my books are closed now. And I'm just thinking like, I think that's not a very good practice personally, but that's just my opinion. So moving beyond that, I think there's a tool we could create that would allow our providers to do more self-service. And I do think with the development of our app, web app, that would certainly help us with that piece. But then you're right, absolutely. How do we expand geographically? And I do think that's a very targeted, in my mind, I always think that we maybe start with certain markets and begin with our marketing and advertising and be strategic about which markets those are, right? So like, we could stay certainly within the Midwest and move over to Minneapolis, I think Denver. And then I think there's other things that we have to be cognizant of, within the industry itself. I think that sometimes, without getting into specifics, but we really want to be careful and mindful of markets that have had, I think of like the nail industry in New York. I don't know if any of you recall, but there was kind of an expose piece on, what was happening there and the exploitation of labor within nail salons specifically. And so my goal would ultimately be as we start, we need to expand in markets that maybe just have, stronger regulation. And yeah, I think that would probably kind of summarize my thoughts on that a little bit. But open, certainly we don't have to stay in the Midwest. I think it'd be really great to also see how this would do maybe in an area that has higher tourism traffic to really tap in again that, leisure wellness. So
maybe as a slight kind of twist or follow up on that, have you actively kind of gone out and tried to gather customers? And if so, are you seeing some general kind of funneling? Like how many folks do I get to talk to that want, what is a conversion rate? Do you have any sort of hypothesis at this point or stats that you kind of discovered?
So it's kind of curious because I always thought that our target demographic would be, I think that obviously when we talk about spa, a lot of people think or assume maybe that's more women, right? And so I kind of always thought like, our avatar of a consumer was a woman, professional, maybe has 1 to 2 kids, maybe pulling in anywhere between like 75, 90K, something like that, a little higher maybe even. But I'm actually always surprised because I think that we can span, I think some of our consumer data has shown some Gen Zers, and we even have somebody who's probably in their mid 50s using the product as well. So
let me clarify it and maybe even just offer some help in terms of why I'm asking.
Yeah.
I think as you build out this business plan and your financial ask and you kind of tweak this pitch and as you go out and talk to investors for real, I think that they're really going to look at your financial projections, right? Which are going to be based on a set of assumptions. And I think one of those is like, listen, here's the market and we're doing, here's our product or service and we're doing awesome things, and that connective tissue, right, is kind of how you are selling. What's that marketing strategy and what's that response rate? How many today, maybe it sounds like, if I'm perceiving this correctly, that you put it out there, and whoever shows up and inquires or asks for this, you're going to sign them up. Maybe there's some word of mouth referrals going on, but perhaps not an active marketing campaign where you're trying to push out and find these people. If I was selling books door to door, what I would kind of want to find out here is, listen, I need to knock on 100 doors. 10 of them are going to invite me in for lemonade, and one of those is going to actually buy my set of books, right?
Gotcha.
And so I can say, listen, if I want to sell 10, I need to go talk to 1,000 people or knock on 1,000 doors, right? And so then we can kind of just start to do that. And there's the reality check of, listen, do I think Jess can go do that, Jess and team? And then do these financial projections start to make sense, given that that's just math, right? If we believe the assumptions, the rest is just, that's kind of what I was getting at. And it sounds like you're in the process of building that, but that's something that I think could be helpful, not only for your financial projections and those assumptions, but when you talk to investors, if you can kind of go out with, here's kind of our strategy. And even if you're going to make a guess, right, to call it something fancy like a hypothesis, but here's what we assume is going to happen and what our conversion rate will be. Those would be interesting things. And that is not easy, right? But the more work you can do towards figuring that out, I think the more solid your projections will be. And of course, that'll get the investors excited, hopefully.
Yes, thank you for that. I totally agree with you. And I think that it's honestly one of the more, I don't know if it's the more scary piece. To kind of follow up on that, we have done just a teensy tiny bit of work in that, digital marketing sphere. But I mean, we've barely scratched the surface. So you're absolutely right. If I were to say we've done 2,000 impressions, and from those 2,000 impressions, we've gained 12 consumer clients, that's where I think I get a little muddled yet. And I think there's opportunity for us, but also, I definitely think that's an area of growth for sure.
Cool. I think that'll help you too, as you look to expand into other areas, that you can kind of use that as your playbook, right? And budget on both sides.
Good stuff.
Have you connected with any of the schools in this industry?
Yeah.
It seems like that'd be a really great target market.
So I definitely think that's something on the plate and something for sure worth pursuing. I think that's a great area where we can try to start finding some of our next, our next providers for the platform for sure. Just hasn't quite happened. I do know someone within the Fargo-Moorhead area that would be a great contact for that too. But thank you. Yeah.
Sounds good. So I've got maybe just a couple questions kind of disconnected. One is an awful one, which I suspect you're dreading, but I'm going to launch it here at the end. But the easier one perhaps is from a competitive standpoint. A lot of times we talk about intellectual property, or do you have anything kind of that's defensible from a moat that you kind of create with this product that would prevent others from copying that, especially any of those tools out there from a scheduling standpoint that are perhaps prevalent in the industry today? Any competitive advantage that way?
Unfortunately, at this point, I don't really feel that what we have and how we're kind of doing all that, I don't know that I would necessarily have anything that would be patentable. I mean, I certainly welcome any conversation with someone to kind of take a look to tell us if they thought that actually we did. But no, I don't think that we would have anything like that really gives us a competitive edge at this point.
Got it. All right, I'm gonna launch it then. Hannah, you can keep asking too, but really my last question, which is we would never let an entrepreneur out of the pitch room without asking this question, which is, for $350,000, what are we going to get? What are you asking for? What are the terms of your investment? What's that valuation?
Oh, I know you want a valuation. Honestly, I am not even remotely close and prepared to ask for the company valuation on it, especially since I can't even provide you guys with a total accessible market. And this is, I think, areas where my pitch is definitely needing growth and development for sure. So
fair enough.
But thank you for asking it, because it's in hearing it in these scenarios where I'm like, okay, now we got to go do it, right? Like, Tim wants to know, and so I need to figure that out.
Yeah. Have you prepared financial projections? And if you have, how long do you anticipate it taking to get to profitability?
I am so appreciative of you asking. I do not have any projections at this point yet.
Maybe just one more question, since we've got a little bit of time. Kind of with this round of $350K that you're kind of zeroing in on, does that, I heard you talk about kind of building out the app, right?
Yep.
Is that mobile or web or both?
I would prefer for us to develop like web app so we
Yep.
can be compatible on both. But I mean, obviously, if we had to narrow it down and they said like we can develop for mobile, 86% of almost all these appointments are happening on a mobile device.
Yep.
And that in numbers probably only increase. So it would make sense then for us to, we could develop certainly from that sphere. I just, at the same time, like web app, I think sometimes isn't it a little more shareable at times too? So however, we need to approach that. Yeah.
Okay. No, and that's for context. Really what I was getting at is that 350K, is that used for your contractors on the technical side, or do you plan to build out technical talent on your team for this project and others?
Yes. So I think that with that figure, it was in mind that we would contract out to have it built. Mm-hmm. Yep. And I mean, honestly, I would prefer if I'm being honest, I would prefer to have a team, but I think that, you just have to approach it, and there's pros and cons to both sides of it. Right. So.
Jess, is this your full-time job right now, or are you still working on the side?
Yeah. Actually, no, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing this full time right now, and I have some other things on my plate, but not anything that is full time. So yeah.
Maybe just talk about like if everything went as planned, what is like your vision for the company?
Yeah. If everything went as planned, my vision for the company stems from two different things. This is a really great question. I do want to improve search and booking. I think that's a necessary element, but I think that there's opportunity there. And I think when you look at our platform, who we serve, right, we're a two-sided marketplace. And so we serve two kind of groups of people. But our core group that we service are salon and spa professionals. And, those professionals are really who are at the heart of our decision making. And so how do we help them? And I think when we look at service providers, there's something very unique and special about what they do. But there are a lot of limitations to that, right? And so how then do we help them continue to grow their business? Because some of them don't have interest in, hiring 5 employees. And those 5 employees are never going to be able to replicate them in what they do. And so I think it would be really fun if we can, change the dynamic a bit for them and say, when we look at how you schedule an appointment, and providing, basically what I'm trying to get at is that I would like to provide them with the tools that help them maximize and capture the most revenue for what they're doing. And some of that stems from, when you look at the hospitality business and how they measure and sell, their available inventory and how they treat that inventory. I think there's opportunity for us to bring that to salon and spa providers. And so ultimately, when I set out on this, that was something that I wanted to bring to the industry. But we can't do that by just suddenly coming. I know the resistance and I know the things that they would say to me if we said that, initially and said, hey, we think that your time is very valuable and we think you need to approach how you schedule and how you charge for that time very differently. So I'd really like to bring that to them. I also think that there's some opportunity within the industry. I know that, it used to be that professional product was a huge portion of salon and spa sales. And I do think that there have been some things that happened in the industry that have really cut away with that. And I think that there's opportunity for us to, if our platform can grow, that perhaps there's something we can do to kind of help bring that back to the provider as well. But that's another huge undertaking. So I don't know. I really love this industry. And as I envision what we do with it, I see it growing in so much more than just, filling and scheduling appointments. But that's where we start. Does that help answer maybe some of your questions?
Yeah, and I can really feel your passion for what you do. So that's great. And that's super important in a pitch as well. So you're killing it. Maybe one more question for you is, what are you looking for in an investor? Are you looking for someone that's, been in the industry, or are you kind of just looking for an angel who's willing to support you?
Yeah. So I think that I'm very, very green in my journey, and my company is obviously very young in infancy as well. So for me, I really am looking for someone who can provide guidance. And yeah, I need support for sure, who's willing to kind of maybe help me also see like some of the blind spots, Yeah. And I'm a little green to kind of how some of those relationships can work, but that would kind of be important to me as well. As far as like brings industry experience, do you mean like maybe it has brought a web app to market before, or has developed like is working with?
Yeah, someone who's done development, or someone who has, been a hairstylist before, owned a salon or something like that.
Yeah, I guess I think when I think about that individual, or group of people, however you want to put it, I do think about like being able to tap into their network and being able to also. I don't think that necessarily salon and spa industry experience would be necessary by no means, but I do think having that experience of working with a company that's bringing a web app to scale and has seen some of the pitfalls that could happen, I think that would be a wonderful element. But again, being open to like. Sometimes, I don't know that I necessarily want to limit myself. And so, what would work best? I don't think that I would have success bringing this forward if I brought it forward with just someone who already had salon and spa industry experience and we're like, I think this is a great idea. Let's go and do this. I think we need someone who can tap into the information or the knowledge of developing a tech company.
Yeah, you always want to surround yourself with people who are more knowledgeable in things that you aren't so knowledgeable in. So I totally agree with your approach there.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Hannah.
Really good job. You guys good with questions? Any other lingering questions from Tim and Hannah?
Not for me, Jess. Good job.
Thanks, guys.
Not for me either.
That was really, really great, Jess. I'm very impressed. I actually had a couple ideas for you. I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I think that there's an opportunity for you to use AI in your platform, because if Hannah goes on and she books a massage tomorrow and then she books a massage again in 3 weeks, then that's when you can start taking that data and you can predict and you can say to her, hey, Hannah, and I can't remember, I liked how you phrased it, leisure.
Oh, leisure wellness. Yeah.
Leisure wellness. Yeah, like I think you could trademark leisure wellness, and then you could start predicting like, oh, Hannah, it's your birthday. There's happens to be 3 openings in, Fargo for a facial. Maybe you should book these with a 20% discount. Like things like that. That's where you could take AI, you could take machine learning and then predict what Hannah wants to do next. That's where I think you could get it a little sexy in your development. I might be way off, but that's just from my standpoint.
I think that's absolutely like, I totally agree with you. And I think that there's so much potential there. So I think sometimes, when we talk about my limitations as a founder, I certainly think not having that technical background is where I struggle, because sometimes it's like, well, what is possible, right? And what is also realistic for us, developing a realistic timeline and a realistic budget and all those kind of things. And that's where I think I am never going to pretend like I, know more than that. I know enough to be dangerous. So I think that's wonderful, Patty. And thank you for that. No, I totally agree with you. So I love that.
Yeah, I would just say ask those developers, those Jose, and ask them those questions, because engineers are really good at taking direction and doing what you ask them to do. And I'm really guilty of this. I've learned through experience that maybe sit back, ask other entrepreneurs or other tech founders of, okay, what does this mean? Like, what is machine learning? How can I apply the type of technology that's used in software for fintech or in other markets? And how can I apply it to my technology? Yeah, that's what I would encourage. I always encourage people to look outside of the industry too, because we can learn so much from them. And like Hannah and Tim, they're asking those questions because they see so many different deals and so many different types of technology. So
yeah, no, and I have to say too, I love those founder stories too, where, like maybe it's somebody like me and they're developing something for some industry and they find another like completely unthought of applicable industry. And I certainly wouldn't be opposed. I kind of know where my lane is, and I've been kind of trying to stick in it, I guess you could say, for this round at least anyway. But yeah. Thanks, Patty.
They appreciate that. Don't you, Tim and Hannah, where it's not the entrepreneur that's chasing
Yes.
after 50 different things.
Yep. Very wise.
How about your questions? I know you had some questions, Jess. We definitely have time for that. Should we move into that now? And
Yeah.
you had some really great things too that you'd like to understand. So why don't we get into that?
Awesome. Okay. So why don't we start with that and kind of talking about founder experience, especially since I was just referencing that. One of the things that I really want to know, previous non-technical founders, obviously have shared their stories. I always think of Brian from Airbnb and talking about how, they really weren't getting very serious traction because they didn't have a co-founder that had that experience as a developer. And so I guess my question in for you is that would you take a project, if I came to you with projections and everything that I needed, full business plan, all of those kind of things together, would you seriously consider my project without a developer co-founder on board? I guess my question is that, having that other co-founder, is it still needed? Is it still relevant in today's climate with all the different tools that are out there? And yeah, please elaborate.
I don't think they necessarily need to be a co-founder. I think a lot of people do outsource that. I think if you can articulate what you want the product to be and you can understand it, I think that means a lot. I don't think they need to be necessarily a co-founder, but it helps when you do have people on your team. I mean, the more talent you can have on your team, the more it's going to help you. That's what I would say.
Okay.
I agree with that. First of all, you founded the company, right? I know you can technically add a co-founder at some point, but maybe that ship has sailed in my opinion. No, I don't think it does. It doesn't make you ineligible for this type of financing at all. But certainly, as Hannah mentioned, teams and kind of the awareness of the talent that's needed on that team or how you're going to get it in an outsourced capacity until you can afford perhaps to bring it in-house. I think that's important and attractive. I am attracted to companies that have technical talent on the team already. So it doesn't make you ineligible, but perhaps if you had that in there, that would make you even more exciting or attractive to a venture person. One is it's a technical project, right? Or at least a component of that. And, if the next round is tough and the projections just aren't or the reality isn't quite happening as perfectly as the projections were laid out, someone that can write some code and do some of that without having to cut a big contractor check every month. That's kind of nice, right? You can kind of buckle and take care of business. So kind of depends. Once again, I think you look at it as an entire kind of plan, which team is a very huge component of that at these early stages. But anyway, that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Cool. Thanks, guys. That's actually very helpful. Okay. Other questions I had is, so I think that the one I would maybe focus on is, so here I am, I've got this concept, I've got an MVP up and running. Certainly, we don't have traffic in the hundreds and thousands at this point. When do you see like a good time to start seeking outside investment? Is there still some work that I have ahead of me to obviously we've talked about some of the things that I do need to prepare, pitch wise, but is this a good time? Are we, 6 months down the road? I'm always kind of curious, what's the timing on inviting an investor in?
From my perspective, that's a great question and an impossible one for me to answer, right? Because the answer is it depends, right? The great business school kind of answer. So first of all, different financiers, angels, there are different folks that are looking at different stages, right? So I would look at it more from a year standpoint. On one, this is going to sound contradictory, right? One is that you want to perhaps raise capital before you need it so that you're not in a pinch and having to stall out progress. At the same time, don't take it unless you need it, right? Any way, shape, or form, equity financing, it's going to be the most expensive capital you can take on, assuming you're successful, right? Yeah. If it's a crash and burn, then that's a different story. So you don't just take it, right? And generally speaking, the further you can develop something which would decrease the risk, increase the revenue, the opportunity, the traction, everything, the better valuation you're going to get, right? So the same dollars from today, if you're going to take dollars 6 months from now and you've achieved these various milestones, that same dollar, you're going to have to give up less equity in taking that, right? So that's attractive to you. So if you can bootstrap, But at the same time, you also have to kind of manage the speed to market, right? Listen, is there a huge risk if I don't get this out and everywhere fast? So a lot of times for me, where I like to see venture dollars and even sometimes later stage angel dollars go to is kind of the growth of a company, right? Speeding it up, typically adding, a sales type function in-house. So that's, once again, that's a very tough question to answer in my opinion, and it's so variable, but those are kind of some thoughts from my standpoint.
No, I really see where you're like kind of, scaling speed and also like hanging on to equity. Absolutely. So
the good news is there's no one right or wrong answer, right? There's a lot of ways to achieve success here. It has to match what you want and can do. But I think that there are types of money at every stage. So it's just a matter of when you think you're ready to take that on.
Okay.
Yeah. And like Tim said, there's a lot of ways to raise money nowadays too. So don't just think you have to go straight to venture capital because like you said, it's going to dilute you and it's going to help you at later rounds if you have the least amount of dilution. So just keep your mind open. Sometimes I tell companies just go search for grants that might apply to you. You never know what's out there. You never know unless you try. So people like to see bootstrapping. They like to see the grit and, the hard work behind that. From my standpoint, a more later stage, I guess, probably between like your seed and your Series A. And so I have to have a business plan. I have to have financial projections. And so those are going to be the biggest things on my end. And then some kind of sales or proof of product market fit. A lot of times people have their MVP and they're like, okay, now I have this, it works. And now I'm ready to build the thing. So I need to bring on a developer. So that's usually where we come in. So from my perspective, that's what I would be expecting.
Okay. That's helpful too. Thanks, Hannah. Yeah. Love that. Okay. I think that any other questions I have, maybe, do you guys have any other thoughts or ideas on recommendations in building this as a SaaS?
Yeah, I think one is I just think that's worth time investigating that. I think the stickiness of that model, I think, is attractive to an entrepreneur and an investor alike, right? And I would continually talk to your existing and future customers about what that might look like. I think there is a price point that works, right? And I can certainly appreciate kind of how you're starting because there isn't a lot of risk to that client or that customer. But maybe as they continue to see that value and you can add more, I think there's probably a way that you can do that. Yeah, I think it's a pricing kind of component and just kind of dialing that in, I guess, is where I would look. But I would encourage you highly to go after that. It's a lot easier to value a company that has recurring revenue like that. So that's one advantage to doing that, if nothing else, but in this financing context.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. Sounds good.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. Another, just like making it maybe like a hub, like something that you can integrate a bunch of things with. So can this connect to my booking platform? And can this also connect to QuickBooks? If it can be that one connector between everything, it could be, more valuable to people. That was just an idea that I had.
I like that. Cool. I'm going to write that down actually.
So like different APIs, Hannah, is that what you mean? Like an API that would connect to the different platforms?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So that's a Jose question that he's probably super familiar with, but hasn't served that up to you on a platter yet.
I love it. Yeah, I think beyond that, I think my last question would probably center around just any other resources you guys would have recommend or you suggest I connect to at this stage for where we're at with our MVP and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe the alphabet soup of providers out there, kind of check them out, see what they can offer. I'd encourage you just to immerse yourself in that customer world. I think one maybe scary or misstep some folks have that come from the industry is that they believe they are their target market and know everything about that. Not at all implying, Jess, that you're thinking that, but I think sometimes we can have some blind spots if that's the case. So continue to go talk to that market, and especially if you've got kind of this early adopter kind of power group that's willing to give you, some feedback. I think take that and live in that world. I think that will help and ultimately help accelerate that product market fit. I know North Dakota has some great financing programs. Hannah, I'm going to send you my Venmo account here. Chat box, but No, I mean, North Dakota is awesome, right? For all the reasons, but they are able to act at various levels in this financing thing. And some of those, like to Hannah's point, are not dilutive, right? Don't get caught chasing grants and having this kind of mission bleed and go, do what you're going to do, right? But then find those tools that will support kind of your strategy and plan to attack that market. But I think you investigate that, right? If there's low interest loans, forgivable loans, things that, that are patient-like equity, those are extremely valuable. And not every ecosystem or state has those kinds of tools. So definitely worth time to foster those connections and see if that works for you.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I second that. I mean, you're in an Innovate ND right now, which is a great program. There's also accelerators that you can look into that can help to grow your business. So I know North Dakota's generator is now in town, so that could be someone that you make a connection with. Other things like ILT Academy. And then it's just having those people around you who are, I guess, experts. So I think you're working with the SBDC on creating your financial projections. So just keeping those connections and fostering them, I think, is just going to be super helpful for you.
Cool.
I don't have a specific program for you, but if there's any program or community of kind of the founders, especially the closer to kind of a technology company trying to, that would be huge, right? I think that'll help give you some sanity. It accelerates your learning curve. I think that's great. And that might exist at a national level for what you're looking at. I don't know that, but certainly the Fargo community has a number of founders, Patty included, that are pretty generous in giving back. Talk to those folks, right? And the closer to what you're doing, the better. But they all have kind of life and they've got scar tissue that they're willing to share. That will hopefully prevent, or like I said, keep you from making some of those mistakes if they are.
Yeah, and also the North Dakota Women's Business Center is also a good resource for female founders.
Yeah.
And then to put a little plug in for She Starts Week, it's a week that's happening in September where we're going to have a ton of events in Fargo to help founders like you gain some tactical skills to help grow their business. So North Dakota has a lot of opportunities. So I'm glad you chose the state to grow your business in.
It's really wonderful. And I'm always impressed with the things that we're able to do with the small amount of people. And I don't know, I think it's pretty great myself too. But yes, I can actually attest to that, Hannah. And so Patty, all your listeners need to help. Actually, it was through She Starts Week last week that I felt comfort in kind of hanging out in proof of concept and trying to say, like, what am I trying to do? And how do we get to sort of the very simple element of it and develop it? And it was through one of those sessions that I think really kind of helped. It was a catalyst, I should say, for me getting that traction. So I will be there again this year and I can't wait for it, actually.
Awesome. Great to hear. Maybe we can put that in the show notes, Patty, the link to our She Starts Week website.
Heck yeah.
Awesome.
We might even live stream because Checkable is hosting one. So we might even live stream ours. That's what we were talking about we're trying to do a little setup in our office like that. So we will definitely put a link there and several other links. We'll do it to Homegrown Capital and North Dakota links as well. I do have two questions of two things that you're working on. One of the forecast and then the other to identify the total addressable market size. From your perspectives, how do you recommend entrepreneurs really start pursuing that, start getting their arms around that? Because I mean, I'm still working on projections and it's a really scary thing if you're not a person. And it almost feels like, well, I don't know how to predict the future. Why are they asking me these questions? Well, it's the most important answer that an investor wants to hear. So from your two perspectives, I'd love to hear what's sort of the formula or first step that you recommend entrepreneurs take when creating their forecast and then identifying the market size.
And you want me to try?
Yeah, you go ahead first.
Yep. Okay. Also no right or necessarily wrong way to do this, but how I kind of look at that, two questions there. One is the TAM or total addressable market. Yeah, I mean, one is we want to see big markets, right? I mean, to have a venture scale business, it needs to be big, generally speaking, rather than a tiny sliver of something. I think you want to kind of drill down as much as you possibly can into to finding obviously what is truly addressable for you and kind of hits a sweet spot for your product or service. And that's easier said than done, right? You understand that. And a lot of public like research tools and stuff, industry reports, it's going to get you part of the way there probably, like I'm not sure, like you had thrown out that stat, Jess, for instance, of 180-ish million, was that right?
Yep.
$186 million. And you classified that, I think, as software for salon.
Yep.
Where my mind goes with that, just to illustrate, Patty, is like, hey, what else is included in that? Does that include QuickBooks? Does that include, right? And then you start to and try to figure out exactly what is comparable. But that's better than nothing, right? Hearing that, it helps to kind of, one is it acts as a filter for folks, right? To say, listen, does it have even like the scale that we're interested in? So that's helpful. And don't be afraid of that. You don't want to be talking to someone that isn't a fit, right? For very long, at least. But you start kind of with what's publicly available. And then this is kind of where a segue into the projection question, Patty, is for me, you have to make and state kind of these assumptions, right? Like, listen, okay, I understand that. And I do, for instance, Jess, like, okay, yeah, QuickBooks probably is a part of that. Go backdoor that and try to figure out how many folks are using QuickBooks. And maybe you find out that, small businesses are, 80% of them use QuickBooks or something like that, right? So you can start to extrapolate and kind of play with that and start to remove that manually and say, you know what, based on some research and some calculations that we've done, you can defend that if you need to, but here's what we think our total addressable market is. We would look at that, and I'm honestly once again, I'm interested in size, but I'm interested in that you have the ability to make those assumptions probably more than I am the actual number when it comes down to it. Like, listen, she knows what she's doing in order to do that. Hands down, you know more about your industry than I ever will, right? And that's almost always the case, especially if I'm a generalist, right? My partner has some sweet spots that he certainly can go deep on, but almost everyone's going to be more knowledgeable about their industry than I am. So I'm interested in kind of their thought process on that. But Patty, on projections, It's just math. Okay. It's just pretty formatted math, so it's not a homegrown spreadsheet, no pun intended there. And I think it's the assumptions that drive it, right? And I think that the longer you start to operate, the more body of data that you have and can generate. And that's where I was kind of hitting Jess up earlier about kind of what does that funneling look like, right? One is you can show actual kind of funnel and conversion, or this is my best guess, right? And you're going to state that and tweak or adapt as you keep going. So that's how I look at that. If you can drive it down to a single unit of sale and say, here's how that funnel works, then the rest is just math in terms of how many doors you're knocking on.
Yeah, I would second pretty much all of that. And as far as projections, I just want to see that you can talk me through why you assumed what you did. And then being sure that your projections aren't bigger than your total addressable market or your serviceable addressable market. I've seen that a couple times. So doing the research and actually using the research in what you're doing, I think is super important. So where my mind went, Jess, with yours is like maybe looking at how many people graduate from college each year in each of these industries. Okay, I'm on average, they're going to book 3 times with me a year, and I'm taking $1 from them each time. Take that times whatever, and that's my total addressable market. And then say, I'm going to knock on 10 people's doors a month, and I'm going to get one person to say yes. So that's my total or serviceable addressable market or serviceable attainable market. So, you can just like work back, but you could do it how Tim said too. It's all about if you can justify why you did that and you have the facts to back it up.
Let me amend one of my comments too. There is one wrong way to do that, in my opinion, and that's to arbitrarily say that I'm going to get 1% of a big market. Don't do that. Yeah, like Hannah was just kind of talking this build-up approach, right? And then at the end of it, it might work out to something like that, then it's just fine to state that. But here's a big market, and if you get any percent of it, that's a great result. Yeah, we know that, right? Good job. We're looking for something deeper than that.
It's so helpful to hear too, like you guys highlight how you get to those assumptions. So that how is super important, and seeing that thought process, because then, I always think like I would probably prefer to do conservative projections, but is that always realistic and that kind of thing? And so that helps, I think, a lot.
And don't spend any time, anybody, worrying about format and things like that. There are no-cost professionals out there like small business development center folks and others that will take that magical knowledge from you and put it into the format that banks, investors that we expect. It's probably more than what we need, truthfully, but it standardizes that. So don't spend any time worrying about how to make those.
Yeah, I can speak for the banks in North Dakota. They all want the SBDC version of projections. So if you're looking for projections, go to the SBDC. They'll help you.
Yep.
Shout out to Paul Smith.
Yep.
He's our
Paul
guy.
Smith is the best.
We'll have to tag him in this as well.
Yeah, he is the best. I think to finish up with how you just answered, always have confidence in what you're saying, Jess, because when you came up with those numbers and you did the research, just as Tim was saying, he's a generalist, Hannah's a generalist. They want to look to you that you have confidence in what you researched and what you're bringing to them. And when we don't have confidence and we get lost in the numbers, it just makes it confusing. So if there's, from my standpoint, practice and really know those numbers. So then when you talk to them, it's like, looking at the back of your hand, no big deal.
Gotcha. Agreed.
There was so many great things. I mean, really, I look at this as all of the questions that were asked, how well you prepared, Jess, from the standpoint of the investor side as well as the entrepreneur side. I think we're going to have a lot of takeaways and even to just have on a blog for entrepreneurs. And that's really the point of this podcast for entrepreneurs that are in their first 5 years of business that scale to 8 figures. So this one in particular was for raising an angel round. And I think that it was an absolute perfect first episode. So I thank you, each of you, for rolling along with the pitch. And I think it went really well. I'm very proud of you, Jess. And I wish you all of the best. I think you're going to do great.
Well, that means a lot because, Patty, I fangirl over you all the time. I think what you're doing is incredibly phenomenal, and I'm so excited for your company. So just keep doing what you're doing. I'm so excited to just keep seeing it grow. So thank you. That means a ton.
You're very welcome. And Tim and Hannah, I know you're super busy. I'll let you go so you can get back to making some deals and helping other entrepreneurs and growing this economy. So thank you for everything that you do.
Yes, thanks, guys. And thank you so much for your time and feedback today.
Thanks, Patty, for hosting. Jess, great job. Keep at it. I think you're onto something.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Patty.
Thank you for listening to the Persevere Podcast, powered by Checkable Medical. Head over to perseverepodcast.com for notes, links, and additional resources from today's show. To continue hearing insights and gaining knowledge from those persevering, succeeding, and making their dream a reality, be sure to subscribe through your favorite podcast app. Now go make it happen.